Hello, my name is Liza Leonard. Welcome to today's City Club of Idaho Falls program. Today's forum is a presentation of the Idaho Legislative District 33A seat candidates Barbara Ehart and Miranda Marquette. Today's program is being presented by the City Club of Idaho Falls, along with the Greater Idaho Falls Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Idaho Falls Association of Realtors. Before we begin, I just want to take a quick moment to thank some of our City Club sponsors, including Idaho National Laboratory, Bank of Idaho, Floor Idaho, Idaho State University, Idaho Humanities Council, Mountain View Hospital, and KISU-FM. We also want to thank IE Productions for once again hosting us in their fabulous studio and making this program possible. We could not do this without IE Productions. I'll remind you that to find out more about City Club events, please visit ifcityclub.com. As well as broadcasting this program on Facebook, we also will post it on YouTube on the IE Productions channel for current viewing and viewing later, and we'll post it on ifcityclub.com. For those of you new to us and aren't members of the City Club, we just want to tell you a little bit more about us. We are a club of community members, and our club is open to guests. We are an independent, nonpartisan forum for the discussion of public affairs. The City Club of Idaho Falls exists to sponsor and promote civil dialogue and discourse on all matters of public interest. We strive to do so in a nonpartisan and non-sectarian manner, while encouraging broad participation by the community at large. I also want to take just a moment to remind everyone about this year's election and making a plan to vote. Of course, you probably are a pretty engaged voter if you're tuning in today, but those around you might not be. So we encourage you to share this information. Please remember, Election Day is November 3rd. You will be able to vote early in Idaho through October 30th and in person on Election Day on November 3rd. You can also request an absentee ballot by October 23rd, but only if you are already registered to vote. Online voter registration closed October 9th, but if you aren't registered to vote, don't worry, you can still do so in person with the proper identification and proof of residence for early voting or at the polls on November 3rd. You can still register. To track your absentee ballot and make sure it gets counted, or to find out where and how you can vote in person, please visit idahovotes.gov. Now let's go ahead and get to today's program. It is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Carol Honus. Carol Honus is a City Club board member, and many of you know Carol as a trusted news source in eastern Idaho. Many of you also probably very much miss Carol on the airwaves as she recently retired from her 40-year career in broadcast journalism. We are lucky to have Carol here to help us get through today's program. Carol?
All right, thank you. So excited to be here. Feels good to be in front of the camera and behind the microphone again. But let me tell you, retirement is great. I encourage everyone to work as hard as you can and save as much as you can so you too may retire one day. It is very, very fun. All right, well, thank you for that introduction. Now, you know the candidates. So we have Barbara Ehart, and she is sitting on my right, and Miranda Marquette is on my left. And just as we've done in the others, we are a good 6 feet apart. So both of the candidates are slightly behind me and to an angle, and I won't really be able to see their faces as I'm asking questions, and they won't be able to see mine, but once they start answering, then we can kind of look at each other or whatever. It's a good setup, and it makes it possible for you to learn about these candidates in this crazy time of COVID, where I don't know how else we would do this. We just can't all get together like we used to. We have a really simple format. It's the same that we've used in the past. Every candidate each has 3 minutes to introduce themselves. We flipped a penny, and Miranda won that right, and so she will begin with our opening statements today. And then the questions were submitted to us ahead of time by the realtors and members of the City Club board. And if you want to send a question in, there's a way to do that. You can submit your questions through Facebook Live or IE Productions YouTube channel. So if you'd like to do that during this next hour, hour and a half, or whatever, that would be just fine. The last 6 minutes will be divided again between the two candidates for closing statements. And so let's get started with our 3-minute intros and learn a little bit more about these incredible women that want to represent the heart and soul of Idaho Falls in the Idaho legislature. Miranda, will you begin, please?
Thank you, Carol. Are we good?
Yes.
Thank you, Carol. First of all, I would like to thank the Idaho Falls City Club, the Greater Idaho Falls Chamber of Commerce, and the Greater Idaho Falls Association of Realtors for hosting this candidate forum. I'd also like to thank IE Productions for providing their services, and Carol Honas for being the moderator, and of course I would like to thank Representative Barbara Ehart for participating in this opportunity for civil discourse about our positions. So many of you may know that I grew up here in Idaho Falls. I graduated from Skyline High School, and I have parents that instilled in me the great Idaho values that we have right here in eastern Idaho. And I am pleased to have moved back to Idaho Falls so that I could finish raising my son here with the same values that I grew up with. And since I've been back, I have been proud to serve my community. I have been humbled to be able to provide service with the food basket, with the soup kitchen, with Habitat for Humanity, and to provide whatever talents and abilities I have in those areas to help in our community, because we really do need to come together at this time of COVID-19 and work in service together. So I have been very grateful for those opportunities. I'm also proud of the work I do in finances. For 15 years, I have covered financial issues. I have covered personal finance, the economy, healthcare policy. I've covered all of these things for outlets like Forbes and U.S. News and World Report. I've contributed to NPR. And this has given me a lot of really good insight into the way we use our money and how we can use our money to reflect our values and how we can use our resources as taxpayers to reflect the values that we have in eastern Idaho. And one of the things that we focused on when I was working on my MBA was looking at how do we use our money? How do we prioritize what matters to us in a way that can allow us to accomplish our goals? And one of the things that has been very disappointing to me as I have looked at our past legislative sessions and some of the things that have been going on is that we pay a lot of lip service to certain values and certain priorities, but we don't always put our money where we say our priorities are. And I would like that to change. And so I decided to run for office as a way to kind of put that back into the state legislature and carry these values that we have here in District 33 to Boise. And I hope that through this forum, we can connect together and we can kind of go through these values and these resources and figure out a way that we can go ahead and bring real Idaho values back to the legislature.
Very good. Barbara?
Thank you. Friends, thanks for tuning in. And to all who made this opportunity possible, we thank you. You know, let me get right to the heart of the matter. Today, I'll make clear that if you want to continue down the path of economic prosperity and of keeping Idaho free from the chaos and from the rioting and the violence that other democratic states have been experiencing, then you have one choice, and that's to keep me where I am and to continue with Republican policies that have absolutely been serving and working well here in Idaho. There has never been a greater divide between what Republicans and Democrats stand for. And unfortunately, right now, these are key issues that are important to preserving our way of life and our values. I've remained true to those principles and promises that I have made to you to stand for faith, family, and freedom. But you know that because you know me. I've been honored to serve as your representative these past 3 years, and I've been incredibly successful in sponsoring key legislation, most of which has been bipartisan, almost unanimously. This includes my minimum marriage age bill, which couldn't get passed last year by my Democrat colleagues. But I took that on, and through some intensive research and through reaching across the aisle and making sure we preserve parental rights, I was able to get that accomplished. It was something that was important to you. You said so, and I listened. I want you to know some of the things for which I will continue to stand. I will stand up for our President of the United States. I will stand with our law enforcement as they continue to serve to protect our safety. And I want you to understand that I will stand for our flag and for those freedoms and values which that flag represents. Let me share with you, if I may, a story that really exemplifies who I am When I was serving as the head coach at Cal State Fullerton, we had what every conference has, and that was our initial Big West meetings. And this was the first Big West meeting that I'd ever been able to participate in. And as we got to that meeting, imagine this, you had all of the men head coaches, all of the women head coaches, all of the athletic directors, and all the presidents of each of the individual schools, along with the Big West commissioner and staff. And as we sat there, they were taking us through how we would prepare and open for each game. And so there'd be a clock countdown that would start at the 30-minute mark. And at that mark, the teams would come out on the floor. And then at the 20-minute mark, the bands could start playing. You know, at the 10-minute mark, the referees would come out. But as they went through this, they said at the 5-minute mark, that's when they wanted both teams to go back into the locker room while the national anthem was played. And when the national anthem was over, the teams could come back onto the floor. And I want you to understand, in this room, with me being a brand new head coach, I raised my hand. And to the shock of my athletic director, they called on me. And I said, you know, while all the other teams may be doing this, my team and myself will remain on the floor and pay proper respect to our flag, the national anthem. And it was that point they decided that all teams would remain on the floor. And this just goes to show you that one person taking a stand can make a difference. And that is what I'm going to do for you and for Idaho.
Thank you, and thank you for both watching the timer and keeping your comments right within the 3-minute mark. We really appreciate that. Let's start with you, Barbara, just because you brought up sports and your background in sports and everything that you care so much about. You had the House Bill 500, and that was the fairness in women's sports, and it did get passed and signed. Can you briefly explain what that bill is about? I mean, not the whole history of it, but basically, in a nutshell, fairness in sports.
Absolutely. This was groundbreaking legislation. You have to understand, see, when I was growing up, and even Carol, Title IX was not something that we initially had, and Title IX changed my life. Title IX was something that those women who had gone before me helped to pave the way so that I would have opportunities, not just in sports, but Title IX is also about education. And so I have always felt it incumbent upon me to make sure that I help to preserve those opportunities for our daughters and our granddaughters. And this bill merely protects continued opportunities for girls and women in sports. You have to understand that as part of this groundbreaking legislation, this has been polled nationwide, whether Democrats or Republicans, and even in the latest polling with the 10 battleground states, with Michigan and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, states like this, 75% of the people were in favor of making sure we protected opportunities for girls and women in sports. This is an important issue because we learned so much through sports, and I am proud to have sponsored this issue.
Barb, just one more, and then I'll throw it over to Miranda.
Absolutely.
In that nutshell, which is a good-sized nut, you haven't quite said exactly what it does. And correct me if I'm wrong, but exactly what it does is not allow transgender, like a boy that chooses to become, or not chooses, but, you know, has the surgery or whatever to become a girl, they can't compete in any girls' sports, correct?
Carol, that is correct, because to this point, everyone that has that has been male and decided to identify as female started on the men's side first, started on biological male side, and then decided to compete on the women's side, and it's been devastating to female athletics, and so that is correct. This would reserve opportunities on the female side only for biological girls and women.
Okay, very good. Miranda, would you like to comment on that particular bill?
Yes, of course, everybody believes in fairness, and we all want women's sports protected, but this bill ain't it. This bill allows for anybody to be challenged on the basis of their gender right here in the text of the bill. It does not tell you when you can be challenged, who can be challenged, who does the challenging. And when you read this, you're like, well, what happens if somebody is challenged right before a game, right before a match? Are my nieces to strip down in the locker room to submit to the student's internal and external reproductive anatomy? I played sports while I was in high school at Skyline, and I was not subjected to this type of exam, and I think it's humiliating to subject our girls to this type of exam. It is humiliating. This bill is bad policy written with help of outside sources, not even from people in the state. This is bad policy for a problem that literally does not exist in our state.
And you've got 15 seconds to respond to that, Barb.
Carol, that's categorically false. And it's unfortunately we'd have to promulgate such mistruths and misdirection because this bill would be promulgated by our Idaho State Board of Education. And with that, we would follow the policies and procedures already outlined within our athletic department with the Idaho State Athletic Association. And they already have policies in place that would determine how we would go ahead and contest. Right now, we already have many areas that are defined, such as age, boundaries, and you can't just stand up before a game and contest that. There are procedures already in place, and this would fall under that, and it's already been cleared and clarified with that.
Thank you. And Miranda?
As she said, there are already procedures in place. I don't know why we need the government legislating on top of these procedures. I don't know why we need the added bureaucracy on top of these procedures that already exist to prevent this problem that, like I said, does not exist here in Idaho. So I'm not sure why we need to spend so much time on this issue when there are issues like education and property taxes that our legislature should have been addressing last season, but instead spent all of their time messing about with this problem that does not exist and that a GOP appointed judge has already said is very likely unconstitutional. So that's more money down the drain as the state defends an unconstitutional bill.
I could go on
Carol,
with this
Carol,
question
wait,
forever,
wait, wait.
but we're not going
Wait,
to. No,
wait,
no,
wait,
no,
wait, wait.
no, no,
Just
no.
one 10-second
question.
response.
Second question.
Oh,
We're good.
gosh.
We're good. All right. This is fun. And we may come back to it because it is by far one of the most dynamic topics that we had in the legislative session last year. Now, you are up first on this one, Miranda. If you could wave a magic wand and accomplish one thing in this 2-year term coming up, what would the one thing be, your highest priority?
Well, it would probably be the entire way we fund education, to be honest. If you look at the way we fund education and the shift that was made to relying on sales tax, that doesn't provide us with adequate funding. And also tied into that is property taxes. The way we fund education with that combination of property taxes for the local and the state taxes for the more broad-based statewide funding, that combination is very, it doesn't allow us to fulfill our state constitutional mandate for equitable education all across. And so honestly, we really do need to be looking at that. We need to be looking at things like the sales tax exemptions that amount to close to $2 billion. That's a billion with a B. That's almost our entire state budget. $2 billion a year. We need to revisit those, consider whether they're still useful. We need to look at that the internet sales tax that's going straight into a slush fund that doesn't even go with the rest of our sales tax. There's a lot of stuff we need to look at when we talk about funding education.
Okay, funding education, number one for you. Barb, number one.
Well, I'm honored to have been asked to carry next session the wrongful conviction bill with who will soon be Senator Doug Ricks. The wrongful.
Mike? Go ahead.
Should I start
again.
over?
Start again. Absolutely.
My apologies.
Yeah. Yep.
I am honored to have been asked to carry the wrongful conviction bill in conjunction with Senator Doug Ricks. This is important because, you see, when I was serving on the city council and Christopher Tapp was first released, I had walked over there and I sat out on the courtyard waiting for him to come out on the steps. I was one of the first supporters, along with Jolynn Thomas and her husband John, who took all that time and believed in Chris and stood and defended him. What had happened to him is one of the most egregious things. When you take away someone's freedom and their rights, you can't restore that time that is lost. But by gosh, we should work as hard as we can to make sure we make restitution in some other way. And so I will be honored to be able to carry that. I've spent time with Carol Dodge, and I've spent time listening to her story, and she has been such a strong advocate for this and for reform. And that's one of the things that I'll be working on, along with the minority leader, Alana Rebel. We have some things to accomplish along criminal justice reform, and I'll be pleased to help work in that direction.
All right, and Barb, we'll stay on your table there. As our political environment has become extremely polarized, and I don't think anybody can disagree with that, what are you going to do in January to try to bring both sides of the aisle together? And sometimes, Barb, when I say both sides of the aisle, I really don't mean the Democrats. I really mean the two sides of the Republican Party. What can be done about that?
You know, interestingly enough, Carol, the answer to that question is really where I excel. And I excel, particularly when you look at my coaching background. People think, oh, coaching. You know what coaching does? And this is what even Clayton Christensen, who had recently passed away with his innovative disruption, had talked about. Coaches change lives. And coaches are very versed at being able to reach across any aisle, to bring people together. And that's what I've been able to do. And the proof in that is looking at the legislation that I've been able to pass with almost unanimous support from not just each side of the Republican aisles, but also with my Democrat colleagues. It takes time. You have to invest in people. You have to believe in people. And you have to sincerely want to hear what people have to say. And that's really where I excel. I'm a people person. I believe in people. And I believe that you have to be advocates of those that sometimes you tend to disagree with. And you have to listen to them. And that's an art. And that's, again, something where I excel and something I'll continue to work to do when I return to the legislature this session.
Thank you, Barb. Miranda, what about you? So let's say you get in there. What do you have in your magic box that can wave a magic wand and make everybody get along?
Well, first of all, there's no way to make everybody get along, of course. I do find it interesting that somebody who just started this forum out by telling everybody how terrible Democrats are and how there's going to be blood and fire in the street if you elect me is going to bring us all together. I find that kind of interesting, but here we are. But let's be honest, I have Republicans working on my campaign. I have Republicans that have donated to my campaign. I have worked on bipartisan efforts in the past. That includes the bipartisan effort to vote in Medicaid expansion, which won here in District 33 by 65%. I've worked on the College of Eastern Idaho with members of various parties. I have been known to attend Republican women meetings, something that I did when I was a youth with my grandmother, and continued to do after I moved back here, and even as a Democrat. I believe less in party division and more in the fact that we are Idahoans together. We are from Bonneville County together. And I am more interested in representing Bonneville County and District 33 than I am about what party somebody belongs to.
Very good. I just want to make sure both of you can see your time cues, correct?
Yep.
Are you in a good spot? Okay, just remember the yellow means 15 seconds is coming up. All right, Miranda, I think you're first up on this one. And guys, as we go through these questions, if I ever get it wrong, just say so, okay? Businesses have paid a large price this year as they complied with local and state mandates surrounding this whole COVID-19 pandemic. So what would you propose for 2021 that would help all of our businesses get fully back up operational on their feet? Miranda, I think it's yours.
Yeah. So there is no perfect way to address a problem that we've never really faced before in our modern era. And so one of the problems that we run into is it's really easy to look back, it's really easy to second guess, and it's really easy to look back with 2020 hindsight. But the reality of the situation is moving forward, we need more data. We need more information. And the fact that we don't have that information and the fact that we don't have that data is a little bit frustrating. But I think if we can ramp that up a little bit and get more information, and as we follow the scientific progress here, the problem is this is new, this is novel, that's the point. And so we need to be ready to be flexible as we move forward. But simple measures like washing our hands, wearing masks have been proven to be somewhat effective in slowing the spread and keeping us in a place where our hospitals can manage things. And quite honestly, I have been fortunate enough to be able to go to local businesses and participate with local businesses just by wearing my mask and taking these measures. And if we focus on that and focus on flexibility and the resiliency that we have as Idahoans, we should be able to move forward and we should be able to keep businesses open.
And Miranda, follow up if I may. Would you, as a legislator, push for mask mandate?
So I have a hard time with mask mandates, especially since we're in a situation where things are different locally. And so I really like what we've done so far, which is relying on local boards of health who are staffed with experts and with people who are knowledgeable about what's going on in our hospitals. So I would be more interested in seeing recommendations. When Idahoans are confronted with the information that they need, when they have the data they need, we are way more likely to make good decisions.
All right, I'll let you follow up on that, Barb. There were the two questions. What's your plan in 2021 if you get reelected to help the businesses financially rebound? And how are you on a mask mandate?
Fortunately, as Republican policies and with the Republican governor and the Republican legislature, we put ourselves in a fantastic opportunity to be successful. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Let me start over.
You're all right.
Okay.
There you go.
Fortunately, with Republican policies, a Republican governor, and a Republican legislature, we put ourselves in a fantastic position to be able to weather this storm that has rocked so many states. It has been difficult on businesses. We all agree. We're certainly aware of that. But what has been fantastic is the foresight. Prior to any of this happening, the governor had already called for a 2% reduction in all budgets except for education. And so we already had begun to put ourselves in that position because of certain situations that had happened in the prior legislation, such as the deregulation. One of the bills, H500, that I was one of the strongest advocates for, which would put Idaho in one of the best spots in the nation. Number one, as a matter of fact, for deregulation. We are now the number one state for economic momentum, number one state for financial solvency, number one state in personal income growth over the past year, and we are number third in the nation for economic rebound. This is all because of Republican policies.
Can I scoot you ahead just a little bit to 2021? This is good history.
But
and it's good record. Are you just going to take the same stuff and move it into the next year?
Carol, what I'm trying to say is that we already set the stage to be successful in this upcoming year because of what we've done in this past legislative session.
And
so I want to continue along those same policies because we are in a great position and people are flocking to Idaho. People are coming here right now because of our deregulation and how successful we are in our economic rebound.
So continue, with what you've done for an answer. Mask mandate, though.
I do not believe in mask mandate. I believe in educating and giving our citizens reasons why we should wear masks, when and where we should wear masks if we're socially distanced. So no, I do not believe in mask mandate, but suggestions and education.
And your president that you fully support, as evidenced in your opening statement, you're very much a supporter of President Trump.
Absolutely.
Do you wear a mask everywhere you go? Because he doesn't.
But I don't have to wear a mask everywhere I go because a mask, as I've spoken with our Eastern Idaho Public Health Director multiple times, you're supposed to wear a mask if you can't socially distance. So a mask is not necessary to wear everywhere I go. But I do try to respect businesses that ask you to wear a mask even if you are socially distanced. So I do try to be respectful of that.
All right. And just anything else follow up for either one of you on mask mandates? Yeah. We're good? Yes, and most of the time. Was how I'm kind of hearing that. All right, academic standards. That was a really hot topic last legislative session. What do you think we should have in Idaho for academic standards? Barb, I think you're up first.
Would you lend a little more clarification
Sure.
to what you're kind of addressing here?
Okay, so I have to think back to my legislative rules last year. Are we going to make sure that our science classes are teaching what science teachers nationally and in organizations think is important, or will we try to change those standards a little bit? Let's do science. Let's do evolution. Let's do creationism. Let's go there. What would be your bar? What would be the bar that would make all of our kids graduate with an equal competitive education with other states?
Okay, well, certainly in our last session, both the Senate and the House Education Committees joined in together, led by Senator Dean Mortimer, in creating a resolution that was supported by the Republicans and even some of the Democrats, saying that we would do away with the Idaho standards and that we'd replace them with standards that would be more applicable to Idaho. Now, that doesn't mean everything that we had would disappear, but it has created such contention and diverse conversations that probably haven't been healthy. But I was proud to join in with Senator Mortimer, with even my local colleagues such as Representative Gary Marshall, to look to make change and to take things that our kids are experiencing, such as math. When our younger kids in elementary school are with their parents, they need to be able to sit down and have their parents be able to help them. Parents can't even do that. So we need to make some changes that are logical and will work for Idaho kids. And I believe that we are making those changes, and that's what's been being worked on throughout the summer.
And do you think you'll be carrying any kind of a bill, or is that going to fall into Wendy Horman's bailiwick or somebody else's?
No, Carol, we do have some bills currently in the works. And another thing that's going to be very interesting, it would be interesting to address here too, is education. Public education is about to change because of the Supreme Court ruling on the Espinoza case. And that is going to change so many things and provide parents with even more flexibility to be able to use money how they want to use it for their children in school. So it would be interesting to address that also.
All right, Miranda?
Yeah, so that's some interesting framing there, considering that the House Education Committee, including my opponent, voted to strip all education standards from Idaho without a replacement. Standards would be good. I think any standards would be good. Idaho's current standards were developed by Idaho teachers with knowledge in this area, so I think it's kind of disappointing that somebody who claims to support education would vote to strip those away in committee. And Dean Mortimer actually came up with the compromise. Good for him, awesome. Came up with a compromise that stopped completely stripping those away with no replacement. So yes, do we need to update standards and make sure they fit Idaho? Of course we do. Do we need to just strip them away willy-nilly without a replacement? No. And thank goodness that that Senator Dean Mortimer was there to step in and block that effort.
Rebuttal?
Oh, absolutely. Again, misdirection. This is a combined effort. We've been working on this throughout the session, back and forth with the House and Senate Education Committees, and we're able to come to a compromise that we all were able to agree on. It was a lot of effort, and let me also say that when it came to the science standards, those were cut and paste. Those were not developed by our teachers. That is a false dichotomy there, or false analogy there, that is why we want these to be Idaho standards and make some changes. We do have standards, and the standards will be in place when we come this year. Some of them will be the same that we have right now, but we are working on change to make things easier and more understandable, especially for our teachers.
Miranda?
Yeah, once again, I mean, that vote in committee was to get rid of all standards, and there were no replacement standards. And that news that the teachers didn't help out will come as a surprise to the teachers that I talk to who work on these standards. I think it's very disappointing, the lack of support that our teachers have been receiving recently, and that a lot of the mudslinging that goes against our educators who are devoted to our children's education during this time.
All right, next question, and I think, Miranda, it's on your table. Medical debts, #1 cause of bankruptcy in the United States. Predatory medical debt collections can add to the misery. This became a big issue in Idaho with a bill that was presented by Melaleuca's owner, Frank Vandersloot. So what would your stance be, Miranda, on the Idaho Patient Act? It did pass last session. You'd have voted yes or no on that?
Oh, I would have voted yes, definitely. As somebody who has covered these issues in depth for a wide variety of publications and who has covered this very issue of medical debt in the past, I know how devastating it can be. And one of the problems is some of this medical debt is done through mistakes. And so these people end up with these mistaken billing and aggressive debt collection practices can devastate them over a simple mistake. A simple mistake can lead to hundreds of dollars, and many people can't afford that. And so I think it's very unfortunate that people right here in Idaho Falls who were affected by this, in fact, Frank Vandersloot brought this up because one of his own employees was impacted by this very issue. So I think it's very disappointing to me that rather than fighting for us here in District 33, one of our representatives actually fought against us by voting against this act.
And might that be you, Barb, that voted against it?
Carol, let's be clear. This was a very large and complicated bill, and that bill should have been broken into two parts, the medical debt collection and then dealing with medical issues itself with the doctors. My vote centered on voting with the doctors. We had so many doctors asking us, please don't do this. As a matter of fact, the Medical Association, Hospital Association didn't actually endorse it, but just decided to remain silent because of the devastating effects to our doctors. What is going to happen with this particular bill is that when medical doctors cannot collect their debt because it's not worth it to debt collectors, they're going to pass that cost on to you and I, those of us who pay our bills. And what I was told on the very night that this passed, they told me, Barbara, and this was two different doctors' offices, they told me, Barbara, what we're going to do is not only pass it on to you, the consumer, but we're not going to continue to carry your debt. So when you want a procedure done, you're going to have to pay for that in advance. And so we don't have to worry about collecting that. This is going to be very hard and very stressful for our families. I voted for you when I made that decision to stand with our doctors.
And would you be at all interested, Barbara, in sharing the names of some of the medical professionals that were against this bill?
They went and testified, and there are many letters sent in, and I don't think that would be appropriate right now, Carol, but I believe that you can find those if you go back and listen to many of the testimonies.
And that's what our audience can do, too.
Yes.
Any further comment on either of you on this particular topic? It has passed. It's kind of a done deal. Anything else you want to do on it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I look at this too from a doctor and consumer standpoint. You can find plenty of people that'll be concerned about it, but to talk about paying for procedures as if you don't have to pay for them up front right now is ridiculous, because I know, because I've had medical procedures that I've had to pay for up front, the portion that my insurance doesn't cover, you had to pay for that up front in many cases, regardless of this act. So what this act does is add a little bit more consumer protection for consumers who are facing this devastating medical debt. And I would prefer us to put the majority of constituents and consumers ahead of one very important medical recovery services constituent.
Carol?
Go ahead.
That's categorically not true. And I just had a major knee replacement surgery. And I did not pay for anything up front. As a matter of fact, payments were made and arranged by the doctors. The doctors' offices primarily carry your debt. And they told me on the night that this passed, they told me they had 200 people, patients who had not paid their bills, and they had received 3 letters, and they started to call them. And the patients told them, oh, I didn't get the letter. Well, is this your address? It sure is. Well, how is it that they weren't willing to pay the bill for services rendered to them? 200. And they will no longer continue to carry this debt that they're carrying right now. I was working to protect you. This should have been broken up into 2 separate bills.
Okay.
Carol?
It is in the past. We'll let it go now because it did pass, but I was curious to see how you guys came down on it.
I just think it's nice that some people have that good insurance. Not all of us get that.
I'll tell a little story just for levity.
Carol, that's not
Barb,
fair.
listen. I had to pay for all my babies to be born. You had to pay in advance back in the day. And I had Creighton, the third one, in the front seat of the car. And the doctor sent us back half the money because we never used any rooms. So there are doctors that will work with you paying it in advance. Let's just leave it at that. Never had another baby after that. That third one was enough for me. Okay, now let's talk taxes. I mean, this is really a problem. And you kind of brought it up, Miranda, with you would fund education differently. But what about property taxes? And I think it's Julianne Young out of the Blackfoot legislative district that was interested in increasing sales tax quite significantly. Kind of surprised me as a Republican. You don't usually hear that from that side of the aisle. But let's see, Barb, is it your turn first?
It is.
What are we going to do? I mean, the property taxes are just going up and up and up. Are you going to favor raising sales tax, which is kind of regressive? What ideas do you have?
First, Carol, let me say that when it comes to property taxes, I am your defender. Let's make it very clear that when I served on the city council for 4 years, not one time, not once did I vote to increase your property taxes. I stood alone in that. I voted to stand with you. And you know what? We've even had people who are supporting and helping to run my opponent's campaign who came in specifically to testify that they were okay with raising our property taxes. But what people fail to realize is that those people who have money, they can afford, I guess, to have their property taxes raised. People like me who are on a very limited income and work hard, sometimes 4 jobs. I have 4 jobs that I work just to make ends meet. There are a lot of people out there with little homes like mine that are $100,000, $115,000, and we can't afford to make those property taxes that they keep going up. Property taxes is a local issue. If you're concerned about your property taxes, you need to be speaking to your school boards, you need to be speaking to your county commissioners, and you need to be speaking to your city councils and mayors, because that is where your property taxes are raised.
What about the sales tax in? Would you support Julianne Young's idea to maybe go up with sales tax as much as 11%?
That would be a trade-off, what we're talking about there. If we were to do away with property taxes and increase sales tax, I don't believe that she was suggesting that we'd keep our property taxes
No,
and
not at
increase
all.
sales. Right. And so that is an idea that, yes, we have floated around. You see, property taxes are one of those most egregious taxes because though you think you own your home and you may own your farms, if you try you're not paying your property taxes and see how long you own your homes. And so property taxes is really one of the most egregious taxes we have. And so if it was a matter of trading one for the other, I absolutely would be in favor of increasing sales taxes and creating a means by which we can have more funding for our schools and other aspects that would benefit our community based on the consumer usage.
Okay, thank you very much. Now yours, Miranda. Property tax, sales tax.
Well, like has been mentioned, property taxes are a real problem. In 2016, the legislature passed a bill that shifted a greater percentage of the property tax burden onto residential homeowners and away from business homeowners. Now, business properties. So as we know, we obviously do not want to penalize business properties, but at the same time, it is a little bit unfair to put most of the burden on residential homeowners, particularly those like Christine Crapo-Hatch, who points out that her property taxes have increased by 1/3 in 5 years. Now, the state legislature did, some members, I should say, of the state legislature did suggest some ways to kind of balance that out a little bit, getting rid of that 2016 law. Senator Dave Lent and Senator Grant Burgoyne wanted to propose bipartisan legislation to deal with the circuit breaker and take some other steps. Those are things that we can do in the state legislature, and pretending like there's nothing that we can do in the state legislature to help that is a little bit disingenuous, but I guess we had to spend more time on other issues.
All right, I think
Rebuttal here, Carol?
yeah.
I'll keep it short.
Okay.
Let's be clear. Property taxes are a local issue. If you want your property taxes to go down, you need to make sure that your city councils, your school boards, and your county commissioners are being due diligence with your tax dollars.
And Carol,
because it is a local issue.
Miranda?
Oh, I was just going to say, I'll just take my short rebuttal time to address the sales tax issue. One of the interesting things about sales tax here in Idaho is online sales tax doesn't go into the fund with the rest of our regular sales tax, our offline sales tax. It goes into a special little slush fund. And so I think we really need to look at that, figure out what that online sales tax money is being used for, and why it's being sequestered from the rest of us and from the rest of our budget.
Okay, Brenda, it's on your table. Do you support militia activity in Idaho?
So I am a big fan of the Second Amendment. I am a gun owner. I, of course, believe in the full text of the Second Amendment. And I think it's a little bit concerning that in some areas of Idaho, some of the local law enforcement has stepped back and is basically allowing local militias to patrol the streets. That's a little bit concerning. I do have some friends in northern Idaho that have been threatened by some of these militia members and have had to go into hiding as a result. So that is concerning to me, because in reality, what we should be doing as citizens is working with our law enforcement. We should be working with our government. Any time that we can work together as citizens in government, because that is the point, right? It is of the people and by the people, and so we should be working with our government, and we should be working together. So it is a little bit concerning to me to see some vigilantism rising up out of this.
Barbara?
I support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Idaho. And as long as people act within the construct of the Constitution of the law, I absolutely support them in expressing their Second Amendment rights, so long as they act within the construct of the Constitution of Idaho and the Constitution of the United States.
When Ammon Bundy broke through the glass doors, or whoever the people were around him, at the state legislature, and they marched in with assault rifles, and they looked kind of locked and loaded on TV, what was your opinion on that? Is that Second Amendment? You won't let me in a meeting, so I'm going to bust the door down?
Carol, if you actually looked at my post while we were there in the special session, you would see that I served on the Judiciary and Rules Committee, and we were at the heart of a lot of what was happening. And during that particular session, a lot of commotion had, obviously, if you watch that, had broken out. And I happened to repost Doug Rick's post, and all I said was, I don't think the cause of liberty was advanced today. So I've been very clear about us staying and working with the constructs of the law, definitely freedom of expression, but peacefully assembling. I support all of that. I was a little concerned with some of that which occurred during the session, and I stated that on my Facebook page.
Very good. Would you consider passing a legislative bill that does not, in fact, allow weapons in the State House when you legislators are meeting?
I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to looking at something like that, and not just for those people who are truly wanting to express their Second Amendment rights, but as we get farther along this road where some of this divisiveness gets a little scary. I myself experienced that in bringing forward the House Bill 500, where I had to have security, even for as much as anyone who may come into the Capitol, where we have differing views. It might be for the best for all of us. So it's certainly something that I would be willing to look at, Carol.
It did startle you a bit then, if you feel like liberty wasn't advanced that day, if you felt strong enough to post it.
I did.
Okay. Miranda?
Yeah, I mean, I think once again we need to look at things and look at it in the confines of our Constitution and our rights. One thing that is disturbing to me is the way some of these things seem to not be equitably enforced. For instance, during the contention around Reclaim Idaho and Prop 2 and Medicaid expansion, and when the state legislature was arguing to add expensive restrictions to what we, the people, voted for, people from Reclaim Idaho were told they could not wear green and their green shirts in the gallery. And so for me, it's kind of frustrating that we seem to say, okay, well, apparently wearing green shirts is super aggressive, but we're going to have to take a step back and consider whether or not carrying guns around is. So really, for me, it's more about looking at, okay, what are the intentions here? What are you trying to accomplish? Because as my opponent says, liberty was not advanced that day, and we do need to kind of take a look at what is true aggression and what is mere expression.
Miranda, follow up on that. Can I get and same thing with you, Barb, both of you, this question. Can I get a thumbs up or a thumbs down on Ammon Bundy?
I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big fan.
Thumbs down?
I mean, I really, sure, whatever. I mean, I really have a hard time saying, hey, somebody is, we should dismiss somebody out of hand. Ammon Bundy has points that should be heard. I don't agree with a lot of them, but I have a really hard time saying, oh, somebody's a thumbs up or a thumbs down, because really, we should be working on civil discourse. And my main problem with Ammon Bundy is that a lot of the time, he does things like force his way in rather than engaging in civil discourse.
Barbara?
There's a lot that I would agree with right there. And Ammon Bundy has been through a lot, being put in jail for 4 years and had a lot of his, well, obviously having his freedoms and liberties removed. And so, he has a different kind of background. I don't agree with his methods, but I'm a little bit understanding, as my opponent is. So it is a little more difficult to give. Sometimes it's a thumbs up and sometimes it's a thumbs down, as with most things that we experience in life.
One Idaho school district, I just had a blurb come out on my phone, and that's what made me ask the question, said a school district has banned an anti-mask activist from coming on the school grounds anymore. I didn't even look to see it was Ammon Bundy. That's just who first came to my mind. But in that particular situation, Barb, what'd you think? He went to his own son's senior, junior football game, wouldn't wear a mask. They asked him to leave. It became a ruckus, and they shut down the entire game. Overreach? Ammon needs to back off. What's your thought on that?
Yes, there are many ways that we can express our voices and let them be heard. And going to the point where you're going to force a game that others, especially our kids, are participating in and enjoying, I think that goes a little too far. But again, I wasn't there. I don't know all that occurred, but I choose to express myself in a different manner, and I think there are a lot of ways that we can be heard and make our points heard without disrupting other people's lives to the extent that they shut a game down and make everyone leave.
Spoken as a coach that might have seen a little bit of bad sportsmanship in her day, up in the stands behind you. So, do you have anything to add, Miranda?
No, I mean, it's one of those things where we talk about, we let businesses decide whether they want to have their own mask mandate. We let businesses decide this, local school districts. These are all things that are decided at the local level, and we can decide whether or not we want to participate or not. And so, and we give a lot of leeway for us to decide whether we're going to participate in these rules or not.
Very good. Where are we? I can't remember. Is it you?
Me.
You?
Or
Okay.
I think it's me.
Barb, here's a good one. Your district is Idaho Falls, and as you've described it, it's the heart of Idaho Falls, like the donut hole. In 2018, 65.2% of voters in your district voted in favor of Medicaid expansion for the working poor. So what was your position on that, and where are you now on Medicaid expansion?
Let's be very clear, because my opponent has not been very clear about this, and it's terribly disappointing. She said that I did not support this. That couldn't be more wrong than anything else that she said. I absolutely supported this when it came time to vote. We voted in Medicaid expansion, but you know what? We did take it a step farther, and we made it better, because Reclaim Idaho failed to include some key components, which we added, such as the ability for those who have current insurance that didn't want to go onto Medicaid to be able to keep keep their current insurance, we also were able to add a mental component, a mental health component, and as we can see is so incredibly important, especially in light of, again, what has hit our community with another suicide. It's devastating. So these things are important. And I will not make apologies, though, for wanting to make sure that some of these opportunities such as Medicaid, we don't want to keep people on social programs. We want to help them and help them find a way out, so that we want it to be a hand up and not a hand out. And so that was my stance on it.
Miranda?
Yeah, so honestly, she campaigned against Prop 2, Medicaid expansion, the whole time. And then in 2018, voted to block health care for the GAP population. One of the reasons why we had to have an initiative was because she voted against HB 464 in 2018, which would have expanded Medicaid. Additionally, these onerous restrictions, mental health would have easily been included in some of this stuff. These onerous restrictions actually added to the cost of this expansion. It added to the cost of it. It added to the bureaucracy of it, and was completely unnecessary. I think it's interesting that she mentions mental health when last February she actually argued against the social and emotional health that was put forward by the governor's task force, or argued against these things in committee, argued against implementing them. So it's interesting that right now mental health suddenly seems very important.
Response? Yes. Thank you. Let's be clear. I voted to stand with you when you wanted to have Medicaid expanded. I voted for Senate Bill 1204, Medicaid expansion. And when it comes to the social emotional health, it was a particular program. I made it very clear that I supported the mental health. I supported help in regards to suicide and helping our kids. That the social emotional programs are a completely different program. So let's be clear. Again, I make sure that I listen to you and I stand with you, and I'm doing all I can to stand with our teachers without putting more responsibility on our teachers to have to teach and uphold things such as social emotional. We need counselors who are trained to do that, and that is something that I support, getting our schools more counselors. They are the professionals that should be dealing with that, not our teachers. So there's a lot of nuances here that my opponent isn't addressing and is just going off emotional things that'll make you think that I was not in support of that, when in fact I am.
And Miranda, do you have anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting that you say that SB 1204 was in support of Medicaid expansion. We didn't need that because we, the people, took on that legislation when our legislature failed us. SB 1204 put onerous restrictions and added costs and added bureaucracy. So you can dance around and obfuscate as much as you want, but the reality of the situation is we, the people, had to pass that bill, and we, the people, had to make that law because our legislators dropped the ball after we begged them for 6 years to take that on. And if we want more counselors in schools, which I definitely agree with, then we need to make sure we fix this education that we pay lip service to and put our money where our priorities are. We must demand that our legislature put our money where they say our priorities are. We need to see that money instead of these continuous cuts and this talk about how we have to choose between things. No, we have lots of money. We have a surplus this year. We have money in a special internet sales tax fund. So to pretend like, oh, we need to try and figure out where we're going to come up with the money, we have the money for these counselors that they say they want, but nothing has been done.
And to follow you there a little bit, what about the idea of initiatives and the people being able, as you said, 6 years we begged the legislature to take care of it. They didn't take care of it. We did it on our own. Now a movement to, if not make initiatives illegal altogether, to make you have to get all the signatures collected in a shorter amount of time. You have to have a way to pay for it. You can't just hand it over to the legislature. Some people might say, well, that's the lawmaker's job. If the initiative passes, the lawmakers have to figure out how to pay for it. Where are you on those initiatives? And then Barb, you're next with that.
So I'm starting?
So the initiatives, Miranda.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think that Idahoans have proven themselves judicious in the kinds of initiatives that we pass. You know, barely more, like just a little bit more than a handful of initiatives have passed since we've had it added to our Constitution. So Idahoans have proven that we are judicious in our use of the legislative process when we use initiatives. We've proven that we can do that. We've proven that we're adults who can do that, even though the legislature seems to think that we're not. And every time we go and we pass initiative, the legislature comes back and tries to make it even harder. And they're trying to make it to the point where it's actually impossible. And they claim that it's to prevent special interests from taking over. But the reality of the situation is if you make it harder for citizens to do this work, that is what makes it to the point where special interests take over. When only special interests can afford to do it, that's when they take over. Right now, we have a nice medium. It's hard. It's just hard enough that we have to work hard. I know. I worked on that Medicaid expansion. I worked to gather signatures. I was not paid to do it. And right now, it's hard, but not too hard.
All right, Barbara?
Well, let's be clear again that regardless of what happened when our Idahoans voted for Medicaid expansion, it still had to come in the form of a bill. The legislature still had to act. So to think otherwise is foolhardy. But in regards to initiatives, this is something that I think is important to understand that initiatives have served a place, but Reclaim Idaho has really made it clear, along with George Soros and the ACLU, that they're going to work to change the makeup of our state. I lived in California for 10 years. I lived under the propositions, which would be essentially the initiatives. And I watched as the propositions and democracy, instead of having a Republic representation, began to change the face of California. And now what's happening in California is Californians are fleeing California. Many are coming here to Idaho, and they're begging us, please don't do what happened to California. It ruined it. And so we need to use prudence to make sure that all voices, including in our rural, are represented, and that we understand that there are costs to initiatives, and they need to be mentioned and put out to our voters so they understand what they're doing.
Okay, you guys, we're just about out of time, and you're going to hate this question, and you know I can't make you answer it, obviously, but yes or no, legalize marijuana. Barb?
No.
Miranda?
Yes.
Man, you did that so much easier than I thought you would. Really expected that to go for several minutes. So nice. Nice job. All right, one more thing, and then we'll have your closing comments. We're in a bit of a housing crisis in the Idaho Falls area, and I've learned this mostly because City Club is sponsoring a lot of events to help educate everybody, the realtors, everyone, about the fact that the INL is going to grow and a whole bunch of people are going to come in and start working there, along with other businesses, and there's nowhere to live. The inventory is so bad. Is there anything you could do as a legislator to help Eastern Idaho, your community's housing crunch? And Barb, are you up?
Yeah,
No, I think Miranda
I
is.
can't either. Miranda?
Okay. Oh, actually, I think Barb's because I went first on this one.
Okay, go ahead, Barb. So housing shortage. What can
Housing
you do
shortage.
as a lawmaker? Yeah.
A lawmaker can get out of the way and make sure that we have opportunities for our private businesses to step up and excel. What a great opportunity to have people moving here and businesses in a position to provide economic growth. This is not the job of government to provide the housing. That is our job, is to make sure that businesses can do that. And so I've always been clear on this particular issue. It kind of is interesting to me that we'd be having a discussion as far as who should oversee that. However, let me say this, that the City of Idaho Falls and certainly the state, which I think we've been doing, can make opportunities easier in regards to their regulations so that our businesses can step up and thrive in creating opportunities for more housing.
Miranda?
Yeah, I agree with my opponent on this. There are definitely things that we can do to provide more opportunities for housing, definitely things that we can do to make it more affordable. One of the problems that we do have right now is that rents are rising very fast, and that it is difficult to afford housing, and a lot of people are being priced out of housing, both in terms of their property taxes, especially for those on fixed incomes, and also in terms of renting. So there are some things that can be done. I mean, there were some basic renter protections, such as fair warning against surprise rent spikes and right to inspection. Those kinds of things to protect consumers as they try and find affordable housing are very important, and there are things that my opponent has opposed in the legislature.
And we finish up now with our 3-minute closure, and according to the flip of the penny, Miranda, you began, and so Barb, you get to begin this segment. You have 3 minutes to say what you want to say to the voters.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for allowing me to serve as your representative these past 3 years. It's been a huge honor. In sports, Teams that are ill prepared for their opponent oftentimes use a tactic known as misdirection, and that misdirection is an attempt to gain an advantage that otherwise would be difficult to do. And I believe my opponent is doing that in representing my votes, not being honest about that which I stood for and the reasons why, and sometimes just categorically telling a false narrative about my votes. And it's terribly disappointing because I'll gladly stand on those things which I voted for, but I want to do it in an honest conversation. I think it's important to look at some of the things that maybe we didn't have a chance to really discuss, such as higher education. You know, it's been said by my opponent that I voted 3 times against higher education. You dang right I did. You know why I did? Because our higher education has become a bloated budget that is increasing at an astronomical rate. And when you look from 2005 to 2018 at Boise State alone, they have increased their spending for 287%. I believe the tuition increase has been 116%. Inflation has only been 29%. I have had letters after letters from parents saying they can no longer afford education. But there's hope, because instead of spending money there, as we send a message, look at what's happening in our own community. The College of Eastern Idaho, I've been working closely with Dr. Rick Amon. I want to see money go there. I want to see us beef up what we have right here. I myself had gone to junior college and had a fantastic experience at North Idaho. I received a great education. We can do more, and that's where I'm going to work to put more money right here in our community because of the success rate that is happening right here at the College of Eastern Idaho. I think it's important to make sure that we understand that we preserve our Idaho values, and that's something I'm going to work to do. People are fleeing these other states. They're fleeing our neighboring states, Oregon, Washington, California, and back east, and they're coming here. Why are they coming here? They're coming here for the life that they used to have. There are a couple of things that are particularly bringing them here. It's the economic prosperity, the deregulation that's occurred in our state. And it's also because of our family values and our traditional values and the Idaho way. And you know, as I stand in conversations when people find out that I'm their representative, and these people who are new to Idaho, and they call me over and they say, please, please, don't let happen to our state right now, Idaho, what happened to the states that they left, the states that they have fled. Please preserve the reasons that we have come here, the reasons we want to be here and raise a family, and preserve what has been good and right for our prosperity. And so I am asking, I made a promise to them that I'd work very hard to make sure that I preserved those opportunities and values. If you want more information, I hope you'll visit my website, and I plan to continue to fight for you. But visit my website at barbaraehart.com or standupidaho.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara. And now, Miranda?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you to all of you who have watched. And once again, thank you to all of those who have made this possible. I find it interesting to say that our higher education budget is out of control when you consider that in the last 25 years, the spending on prisons has increased by 207%. The spending on public schools has increased by 94%, and higher ed 39%. So I guess if you think that prison spending isn't out of control, but higher education is, that's fine. That's your values, and I agree. That's what you've decided is important, and that's totally, you're right here as an American. But I do say, look at the record. Go ahead and look at those votes. Look at those 3 votes to block funding for higher education. These are not bills that are extravagant. These are basic funding bills. Go ahead and take a look at what the INL has said. The director of the INL, the former director now of the INL, has said about measures to stop inclusion. Go ahead and look back at what the director of the INL has said about bills like HB 500. Go ahead and look what our business leaders in this state have said about those bills and the ability for us to have that economic growth under conditions put on part by these bills. Go ahead and look at SB 1204 and see the onerous restrictions for Medicaid expansion coverage that were placed on that. Go ahead and look at that. Go ahead and look at HB 312 that was voted on here in 2020. That was a bill that was designed for basic safety requirements like criminal background checks for daycares and seatbelts for travel. Go ahead and look at how she voted on that bill. Go ahead and look at how she voted on basic renter protections, on the Idaho Patient Act. And Also, go ahead and look at how she voted on the trespass laws in 2018 that criminalize sportsmen who inadvertently enter private land. Go ahead and look at her voting record on the Citizen Initiative. You can sit here and say, oh, well, we need to have limits and we don't want to become like California. Yeah, that's true. We need to have some limits on the Citizen Initiative, but we have those already. And Idahoans have already proven themselves judicious. So why do we need the state legislature telling us that we're wrong and that we need to step back and stop, having them represent us? Like, for real. For real, I'm going to be honest here. They keep telling us to shut up and sit down and not tell them what we want and to just be quiet and take it. And we shouldn't have to do that. Okay, I have grown up here. I understand what we value. We value education. We value property tax fairness. We value access to our public lands. And it's time for us to have a representative who will fight for those things and that will bring real Idaho values back to Boise.
Thank you, Miranda, and that wraps up our debate today from City Club of Idaho Falls for District 33. Just let me say congratulations to the voters in this district that they have two passionate, articulate women caring enough about this community to run for office. So thank you for that. Let us make sure, this is me anyway, we wear masks whenever you can't be 6 feet apart, and let's make sure everybody votes. Please, everyone. Please just vote. Thank you.